Sunak has had enough of saving the planet and now she wants to free Palestine. And this lot don't look like Eurovision fans to me. I'll also play you more of that shocking footage from Sweden and
tackle this problem at source and replace the Rwanda policy permanently.
So do you trust Sir Keir Starmer to stop the small boats? Could he be any worse than Rishi Sunak? Also tonight,
more opportunities for Noah Lynn van Leuven.
Women's darts is under threat. I speak to a legend of the game who is refusing to compete against that trans opponent. Plus,
it is fantastic to be here in Nigeria with you all and to be here at the school for our first visit. Hi.
Who gave Harry and Meghan the right to conduct a royal tour? Well, listen, I've got all of tomorrow's newspapers and front pages for you with my panel. Former BBC political correspondent John Sargent and political commentators Alex Armstrong and Joanna Jarju. Oh, and find out why our country's Eurovision entry for this year makes me ashamed to be British. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Greta Thunberg should stick to saving the turtles. Next.
Very good evening to you from the newsroom. It's just after 9 o'clock. The top story tonight. The ringleader of an armed robbery in which a police officer was fatally shot has been jailed for life. 38-year-old Sharon Beshanivsky was killed when she interrupted the raid in Bradford nearly 20 years ago. Pirandita Khan, who's 75, fled to Pakistan for 3 months after her death and spent 15 years on the run. 3 other men are already in prison for Beshanivsky's murder. Well, retired Detective Chief Superintendent Andy Brennan described Dita Khan as a violent man.
The reason why he's here at 75 years of age is on the basis that he decided to flee the country in order to try and make good his escape and avoid being held responsible and accountable for his part in what had taken place. And let's be absolutely clear, he is clearly the one person that was responsible for organising and planning this and making sure that those that went in there had firearms and loaded firearms in that case.
The Prime Minister insists that people will soon start feeling better off after figures show the UK is now officially out of recession. The Office for National Statistics estimates that GDP rose by 0.6% in the first 3 months of the year. Predictions were suggesting 0.4%. Rishi Sunak says the figures suggest the economy has real momentum, but Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves accuses the Conservatives of being out of touch.
If you look at this Prime Minister's record, since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, the economy is still £300 worse off per person in the country. So these numbers today are not deserving of the victory lap that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt seem to want to go on.
Rachel Reeves there speaking earlier this afternoon. Well, in other news, a psychotic ex-prisoner who attacked and killed a grandfather has been handed an indefinite hospital order at the Old Bailey today. Thomas O'Halloran was riding his mobility scooter in West London when Lee Byers stabbed him. The 87-year-old suffered multiple stab wounds to his neck, his chest and his abdomen. Police say the motiveless attack has left his family shocked and horrified. We've heard tonight that in Northern Ireland, a 37-year-old man has been arrested in connection with what police have called a barbaric attack in the town of Bushmills. It's after another man in his 20s was found nailed to a fence, leaving him with potentially life-changing injuries. Police say the suspect has been detained under the Terrorism Act and that their investigations are ongoing. Sir Keir Starmer says that flights taking migrants to Rwanda would stop on day one of a Labour government. The party leader has confirmed he'll scrap the scheme, calling it a gimmick. Instead, he's pledging to tackle illegal migration with a new border security command, which he says will include MI5 agents. Dover MP Natalie Elphicke, who's just switched from the Conservatives to Labour, welcomes the approach, accusing Rishi Sunak of failing to keep our borders secure. But the Prime Minister claims many of Sir Keir Starmer's proposals are already in place.
The question for Keir Starmer then is, if he cares so much about that, why did he vote against the new laws that we passed to give our law enforcement officers new powers? They've now used those to arrest almost 1,000 people connected with illegal migration, sentence them to hundreds of years in prison, and if it was up to him, all those people will be out on our streets. So I just think it's the rank hypocrisy of this position.
Israel's Eurovision entry, Eden Golan, insists the song contest is safe for everyone after she faced questions following her place in tomorrow's final being secured last night. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protests marched outside the venue in Sweden. They want Israel to be banned from the contest because of the war in Gaza. However, before her performance, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu criticised what he called an ugly wave of anti-Semitism. And finally, before we head back to Nana, a huge solar storm in space overnight means that some of us could be able to see the Northern Lights. If conditions are right, forecasts suggest people in parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland and even further south in England and Wales could catch a glimpse of the natural wonder. Experts say it could be the most powerful geomagnetic storm in almost 2 decades. That's the latest from the newsroom. Another update at 10 o'clock. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, I'm sorry, but I have to say that watching Ollie Alexander with 5 half-naked blokes simulating sex acts in a grotty neon-lit toilet, the song is called Dizzy, it should have been called Grotty. Crotch-grabbing, lick-lipping, Ollie at one point caresses one of the dancers hanging upside down. Judge for yourself. This is the United Kingdom's entry for Eurovision 2024. What the hell is going on? Gone are the days where Eurovision was about the actual song, when Brotherhood of Man, Save All Your Kisses for Me, that was a tune. Cliff Richard and Lulu performed. Remember the late Terry Wogan and his legendary commentary? All of that's gone, replaced by a virtue-signalling political woke fest, with people who hate this great country denigrating it, whilst at the same time supposedly representing it. Now, last year we had May Muller, who came second from last with 24 points. That's 24 more than Germany, at least. They came last. She was found to have tweeted, "I hate this country." And of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson during the pandemic, when he was critically ill with COVID, she tweeted she didn't feel sorry for him. I mean, why say anything at all? Ollie Alexander this year called the Union flag divisive. Well, of course, it's divisive. Each flag represents a different country, so by the very nature of it being a flag, that's its job. It divides one country from another using colour. I mean, it's no more divisive than the letters, what is it, LGBT plus QIAA plus whatever, which divides everybody by a letter whose agenda this performance appears to represent. At least, though, unlike Greta Thunberg, Ollie didn't then conflate the contest with Israel and refuse to perform. Although, let's be honest, the contest reaches a global audience of 162 million people, which is probably the real reason why they're all getting involved. And this week, at Thursday's second Eurovision semi-final in Sweden's third largest city, Malmö, Israel singer Eden Golan was one of the 10 entries to progress. But earlier that day, there was also a demonstration in the city centre with thousands protesting against the decision to include Israel whilst its military campaign continues in Gaza. I mean, it's absurd. They're stamping on the Israeli flag. Further protests and an alternative concert billed by organisers as a song contest without genocide are planned for Saturday. Greta Thunberg gave her 2 pennies worth.
I think they should be everywhere. And once again, young people are leading the way, showing the world how we should react to this.
I mean, what's this got to do with climate change? I mean, is she bored? And activists were gathered outside the hotel where Eden Golan was staying. All she wants to do is sing her song, but this is what she had to deal with at a press conference yesterday.
You ever thought that by being here, you bring risk and danger for other participants and public?
You don't have to answer that question if you don't want to.
Why not?
If you want to answer, okay. Please.
I think we're all here for one reason and one reason only, and the EBU is taking all safety precautions to make this a safe and a united place for everyone, and so I think it's safe for everyone, and we wouldn't be here for any other reason.
I mean, the whole thing's so intimidatory, but because these people appear to believe they hold the moral high ground, it's fine to effectively besiege a young woman in her hotel room by gathering and chanting outside it. In 2022, we finally produced a decent song, Sam Ryder with Spaceman. But we didn't win because of the war in Ukraine. Before that, it was punishment for Brexit, which is perhaps why we subconsciously put forward such atrocious songs. None of this, though, has anything to do with music. Eurovision has become politicised, a politicised nonsense fest, and it's no longer about the song. Or am I missing something? Well, let's get the thoughts of my panel. Former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, commentator Joanna Jarju, and political commentator Alex Armstrong. God, you've got to walk faster than I thought. I've never done the walk before. Right, I'm going to start with you. John Sargent, lovely to talk to you. What do you think? Why are we so obsessed with this or politics getting involved in what is just a song contest?
No, it's inevitable. Once you get an audience, as you say, of 162 million across the world, you can't then suddenly complain about, oh, they're talking about politics. Of course they're talking about politics. This is a moment when countries get together, and if you've got a really difficult problem going on, as there is at the moment in the Middle East, people are taking sides, people feel about it strongly. So you can't suddenly say, oh, we should stop all that, let's just go on about the music. It's just impossible. You're holding back a whirlwind.
But it's about the music, Alex, surely.
No, it's not all about music.
It's a song contest.
No, it's always been about politics. It's always been a question of which countries do you agree with, which Scandinavian countries particularly you agree with. They almost all vote together on all sorts of things. So the idea of there was a golden time when they just listened to the music.
They did.
They've always listened to the music.
What about Brotherhood of
No, they've always listened to the music and also known exactly who's singing and from which country.
Look, there's definitely an element of politics in it. We can't take... I mean, come on, that's the truth. We all know it is. We've got, as you said, Nana, punished for Brexit, punished for the wars in Iraq and all those things for years and years. But, you know, we also do put forward some abysmal acts. And we have put forward a really good act. Sam was brilliant. Sam Ryder was fantastic. But, you know, what we're seeing is brats like Greta who are just jumping on the next bandwagon to get her name up in the press, to get herself on TV.
You didn't say brats like...
Brats like Greta. Greta. She's a brat too. But, you know, she can't stick to one topic, can she? She's always jumping around. Palestine plus climate change.
Like us.
You know, like us.
Why does that have to be her only brand? I know that obviously she's a leader, especially when it comes to the youth, when it comes to climate change, but this is also a human issue when it comes to Palestine. So somebody could say to me, well, stick to marketing. You know what I mean? But I'm entitled as a human being to have an opinion and to go out and protest.
Joanna, they are targeting an act. This poor young girl, she's 21 years old, and they're chanting, booing her while she's singing. It's a singing competition, first and foremost. They're booing her, that poor young girl on stage.
Oh, come on now. She's a very accomplished young woman. She happens to be, not this is at all relevant, rather good-looking. Right?
She's beautiful,
She's very composed. She's only ruined, I have to say, by Netanyahu suddenly appearing to support her, which then, of course, polarised the issue to do you agree not just with the existence of Israel, which is what she's talking about, really, that's why she's there. You're talking about, do you agree with the Israeli policy towards Gaza? And that, of course, is open to enormous argument.
But how is it acceptable, though, for this mass protest outside her hotel that she's staying, and they're chanting all the nonsense they've been chanting throughout the whole... I mean, how is that acceptable?
I think it's because of what she represents, and I don't want to condone, especially, you know, I'm actually, I was going to say I'm a similar age to her, but I'm really not. There's probably like a decade. I'm 30 and she's like 20. I'm like, yeah, we're the same, we're not. But I think it's about what she represents. Obviously, it's never going to be pleasant to see a huge huge crowd shouting things at a young girl who will probably be intimidated. It's not going to be nice for her, but it's about what she represents, and it's about the bigger, much more important cause of the fact that over 30,000 people have died in Palestine, most of which children.
It sounds to me like you're almost condoning the fact that this poor woman is literally been harassed outside her hotel because of what she represents.
I'm not saying that it's okay.
She's singing a song. She's just singing a song.
I'm not saying that it's okay, and I can appreciate that, you know, she would be intimidated and it would have been horrible. But also in those people's minds, they're thinking 30,000 people dying, loads of women and children, over half women and children dying, compared to protecting a young girl who knew exactly what was going to happen, because the conversation about this has been going on for a while. And actually, while we're on this topic, we have to also acknowledge about Russia, because obviously Russia has been excluded before.
Well, that's really different.
And then it's not different, though. It's really not different. If anything...
The point about the Israeli song is it was changed, so they knew
did change the lyrics.
They changed the lyrics because they thought it was too obviously political.
But you know, look, let's just talk about the Russia thing for a second, because it's really important. Like, Russia was banned because it started a war.
Absolutely.
And Israel, calling for Israel to be banned for responding to terrorism is a really, really different thing.
That is disingenuous, Alex.
No,
that is
it's not
disingenuous.
disingenuous.
If this was a week after October 7th and we'd seen some response from Israel and the whole world was saying, Israel, let's exclude them from Eurovision, I would say, OK, you're completely right. But what's it been? 6 or 7 months or something like that? It's about the response. And like I've just said, over 30,000 people have died. They've literally just gone and started an assault on the border of Rafah, where they actually told the people. So it's escalated to such levels.
1 second. OK, so let's be truthful here. OK, so there was a horrendous event on October the 7th, right? It was horrendous. Nobody condones that at all. Israel have responded. But let's not forget that before October the 7th, Hamas were firing rockets continuously through Israel. And let's not forget that Israel would probably look like Gaza if it wasn't for the Iron Dome.
Sure. That is perfectly true. But the awful truth is, and this is just life, that Israel has lost the propaganda war. What people are looking at, now maybe they shouldn't be looking at it, maybe it should be balanced and so on. What they're looking at is horrendous stories, night after night, of families being killed, that child, that little object there was a child, that's another one, that's another one, that's another one, family of 5 wiped out. You can't sort of just ignore that and say, oh, yes, but people should remember what's going on
what about
October
the energy? So why don't we put more energy towards actually forcing Hamas to surrender? See, like, there's all this energy against Israel, they're doing this, they're doing that.
Are you saying they should stop these films, though?
Where's the energy? Where's the energy?
The pictures are being broadcast.
But Hamas...
The pictures are being broadcast, and you
surrender. Why don't they surrender?
Wait a minute, these pictures are coming out. We're all watching them.
But not only that, you said about Hamas. I'll answer you with that, with Hamas. So you're saying about Hamas surrendering. Just the other day, Hamas did actually agree to a ceasefire, right? So in a sense, well, also the terms, but then obviously Israel didn't. But then it was also to have an exchange when it comes to the hostages, and also give all the hostages back. So for you to say that Hamas
I think that's quite naive, and I think because what you said, that they're winning the propaganda war, it's about propaganda. The reason why Hamas have given a ridiculous offer, which obviously Israel would not agree to, is so Israel look bad.
You know, look, I think we're losing sight of what this is all about on this Eurovision stuff, which is, you know, should there be a mob of people bullying someone who's on stage, should be shouting at someone's outside someone's hotel room? Absolutely not. If we're talking about those people representing something, what they're representing is a mob, and they're representing a very angry mob targeting a young woman who just wants to go and sing. And any other year, she would have been absolutely welcomed with open arms. And now there's a bunch of people who don't even watch Eurovision protesting outside her apartment, which is making her feel unsafe. She's getting horrible questions like that. That's what this is all about. That's what this topic's all about.
Netanyahu then appears and
she can't stop Netanyahu from doing that.
She can't stop it.
But the protesters know that she's not Netanyahu.
The moment that happens, it's right. You may as well be at the UN or something.
But they were already there before Netanyahu made a statement.
But a lot of people in Israel also don't support the bombardment anyway. I mean, there's been lots of mass protests in Israel against what's been going on too. So she may represent that.
But that's why Netanyahu, when he comes on, everyone thinks he's fighting for his political life. Everyone knows now he's an unpopular figure in Israel. He doesn't represent the whole future of Israel forever. He doesn't. He represents Israel at the precise moment with this particular coalition inside the parliament. That's it. But no wonder people then outside in Malmo are thinking, hold on a moment, we really should talk politics.
But again, this has got nothing to do with a good song. That's my point.
No, and I think that's what I'm saying here. Is Greta Thunberg. I mean, everywhere she goes, she's either arrested or causing trouble for somebody somewhere. And for her to be smug, sitting outside. If this was outside her house, if this was outside every day and her family's home, how would she feel? I can guarantee if there was a mob of angry people shouting at her, saying "Down with Sweden, down with Greta," she'd be mortified, and the left would come out and say, the left would come out and say, "Leave her alone. She's a young girl."
Can I just say one thing?
Panel, I'm looking forward to the rest of this. This is going to be fun tonight. Well, listen, still to come, a trans dart player is picking up titles in the women's game, but one person isn't having any of it. Now, don't miss my exclusive interview with the defender of women's rights and three-time World Championship finalist Dieter Hedman. But up next, Keir Starmer finally announces his plan to stop the small boats.
Tackle this problem at source and replace the Rwanda policy permanently.
Well, so should we trust Labour to stop the small boats more than Rishi Sunak? Do you think Labour can end the migrant crisis? Tory MP Paul Scully goes head-to-head with the former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Nana Akua, only on GBNews.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GBNews.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this is a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good evening. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Nana Akwe, only on GB News. Coming up, I speak to dance legend Disa Hedman, who is standing up to women's sport and refusing to face a trans opponent. But first, can Sir Keir Starmer or Sunak be trusted to stop the small boats? It's time now for our head-to-head. Yes, Sir Keir Starmer today confirmed that he would scrap the Rwanda scheme, pledging that his Labour government will offer graft, not gimmicks, in a speech off the coast of Kent. Starmer accused the Tories of talk tough, do nothing culture when it comes to securing our borders.
£600 million for a few hundred removed. That is gesture politics. And Britain can do better. Labour will do better. We will end this farce. We will restore serious government to our borders, tackle this problem at source, and replace the Rwanda policy permanently.
Rather than deport illegal migrants to the East African countries, Sir Keir Starmer is intent on smashing the people smuggling gangs at source with a new elite border security command, which will supposedly include MI5 agents. It comes after GB News revealed almost 200 small boats, migrant crossings across the English Channel today, taking the total number of arrivals this year to more than 9,200. But who do you trust more to deal with the migrant crisis, Rishi Sunak or Sir Keir Starmer, or neither of them? Let me know your thoughts by heading to gbnews.com/your say, or tweet me at GB News. And whilst you're there, why not vote in our poll? I'll bring you those results in a few minutes' time. Right, so going head-to-head on this show is Conservative MP Paul Scully and former editor of The Labellist Peter Edwards. Right, Paul Scully, you heard Sir Keir Starmer's speech. He said that, well, he's going to scrap Rwanda, even though it does appear to be working. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, you're right. You've already seen evidence of Rwanda actually acting as a deterrent. There's a long way to go yet. We've got to get them, more people sent to Rwanda. But it's clear signal, as we're seeing in Ireland, we're seeing elsewhere, that people are starting to circumvent that crossing, that dangerous crossing. But all we heard today was effectively a rehash of what we've already got, the Small Boats Operational Command that we've had in place now for a good few months. And, with him saying, Keir Starmer saying he's going to set something new up. And in ending that deterrent and just basically repeating what we're already doing, where's something new in that? Not only that, but he's effectively going to start having an amnesty by allowing people to claim asylum in this country, having come across on the boats, which has been made illegal under the Illegal Migration Act.
Yeah, well, see, listen, I listened to the speech, Peter. I thought it was an interesting speech. I mean, he did go on and on about this emotional language that he talked about. I mean, it's very sad. He talked about the tragic loss of the 7-year-old girl and so on and so forth. Very, very sad, of course. But there was no mention of what he would do with people who failed asylum, if he's going to get rid of Rwanda, who can't be sent back to their original country. There was no mention of what he was going to do with those people.
Yeah, so I think we can all agree that it is incredibly sad, and whatever our differing perspectives, people are losing their lives every month, and it's horrific. But clearly there is an increasing divergence between Labour and the Tories. And we talked a lot about Rwanda. Keir Starmer's language has been quite moderate. I just think the Rwanda policy is wicked, as well as being totally impractical. I just think it's wrong. And that's one reason why Labour will scrap it and spend the money on the new kind of cross-border unit that you've been talking about. You also mentioned asylum. Labour dug out some stats a while ago that showed the Home Office are actually processing claims a little bit slower than they used to be, which would also point to part of the problem.
Listen, I can't let you get away with calling the Rwanda plan wicked. Why is it wicked? What's wrong with Rwanda? Why is it wicked?
Well, I've visited Rwanda about 10 or 11 years ago, and I think outsourcing our obligations to a country that is very poor and is recovering from a genocide that is, beyond horror, words can't describe it, I just think that's indefensible.
Well, well, why is that wicked, though? Sending someone to Rwanda, which is actually, it's got lower knife crime, lower murder rates, lower burglary rates, lower pretty much everything if you compare it to a lot of the places here in this country. Where are you proposing? This is all very well, you calling it wicked, but I'm just not hearing... I mean, did you hear anything, Paul, about where Sir Keir Starmer said that he might send people, instead of Rwanda, if he's not going to do that?
He's talking about doing the stuff offshore, but then why not Rwanda? Rwanda is a very different place to what it was even 10 or 11 years ago. If you're talking about poorer countries, I've not been to Rwanda, but I've been to Uganda, where they have a number of asylum seekers that are coming over, refugees that are coming over from war across the border. And they give them land. They actually teach them what crops to grow and these kind of things in those kind of situations. So they're actually used to dealing with certain situations far better, clearly, than we are. When you've got people that are coming through Europe, coming through safe countries, and then making that final crossing, which I think we've all agreed on this show just now, is incredibly dangerous, incredibly at risk to their lives, at the hands of some of the most evil people in Europe, those human traffickers. That we should agree that is the business model that we've got to smash. But we've already got the small boats operational command that Keir Starmer was trying to rebrand effectively today, doing exactly that.
I mean, what do you say to that, Peter? This sounds like an exercise of marketing, really. We do all the components that he's talking about, MI5 and all the bits he said, put them all together. We already do have those things. He wanted to have a big communication with them. Well, that's easy. We can set that up. But we have those components. Isn't this just a marketing ploy of rebranding something that pretty much already exists?
No, I don't think so. So first of all, we have to remember the number of people that have been sent to Rwanda under the enforced scheme is 0. I think one person has been having been given a large cheque by the British state. But the other reason why I think marketing is very wrong is that the small boat crossings have gone up steadily each summer over the last 10 years. So it's not like we have a system that's working well and Labour want to tweak it. Labour's 5-point plan, you can agree with that, or you can say it's naff all, but they have set out 5 measures that are quite different because the numbers have gone up each summer. And, you know, that's just a fact. You can support Rishi Sunak or not, but current measures don't seem to be having an impact.
Well, you say they're not having an impact, but that's not quite true, is it? Because there are people in the Republic who are suddenly seeing an influx of migrants that are coming in because they're worried about being sent to Rwanda. And actually, Patrick Christys did a little piece where he spoke to people who are hanging around nearby who were also migrants who said that they didn't want to go to Rwanda. So they were frightened of going to Rwanda. Listen, I could talk to you guys for ages. Paul and Peter, thank you very much for your thoughts. That's Paul Scully MP and also former editor of The Labour list, Peter Edwards. So who do you trust more with the small boats? Do you trust Rishi or Keir Starmer, or maybe neither of them? Ian on X says, let me be honest, they're both puppets. Britain is lost. Matthew on X says, Reform are the only party to stop the boats, and your verdict is now in. Just 6% of you trust the Keir Starmer most to stop the boats. 17% of you trust Rishi Sunak, and a whopping 77% of you trust neither. Coming up, as Harry and Meghan start a second-rate royal tour of Nigeria, are they strong global ambassadors to the royal family? Meghan's biographer Tom Bower has to say. But next, a massive row in the women's dance after a trans player is allowed to compete.
More opportunities for Noah Lynn van Leuven.
Exclusive interview, 3-time world champion finalist Dita Hedman is live in the studio after she forfeited her match against that trans player in the name of women's sports. You won't want to miss that. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Nana Acquare, only on GBNews.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The warm weather will continue into the weekend. For many, another cracking day tomorrow. If you like, it's sunny, but we are in for a change by Sunday in the west, where we could well see some thunderstorms. In the east, it's mist and low cloud that's just dribbling back in from the North Sea, turning things fairly murky for the start of the weekend across eastern England. But elsewhere, long clear spells. Decent night for spotting the aurora. There is a chance, particularly across the northern half of the UK. Not too chilly either. Temperatures mostly holding up in double digits, certainly in towns and cities. And a fine sunny start then to come on Saturday. The main exception will be Lincolnshire down through to Cambridgeshire. The London area may well start a bit murky, but by mid to late morning, that mist and low cloud will have cleared. Just the potential for it to affect some eastern coast of England at times. And we'll see cloud bubbling up through the day with 1 or 2 scattered but potentially heavy showers over central and northern Scotland. But most will stay dry and fine and warm, with temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Sunday's still pretty warm, a bit more of that mist and low cloud, particularly in eastern Scotland, so some ha on that Aberdeenshire coast especially. Greater chance of seeing a few more showers breaking out across the Highlands, but more particularly further south, across the west of Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and western England. Some thunderstorms potentially on Sunday afternoon. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Another warm one, and where it stays fine and sunny in the east, we could get to 26 or 27.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Organisations, plural, because there's loads of people doing this. The organisations are charging schools to be part of this odd league table about who's trying to outdo who when it comes to who is more trans inclusive with the kids than the next person. There's something makes me uneasy about this.
Supposing a child comes home and says, you think, oh, I've done well today. He said, well, how have you done? He said, well, I was #1 painter, or I was #1 reader. No, I wasn't. I was made LGBT champion. This is a 4- and 5-year-old. Look, I can understand this, actually, as we develop into the secondary school. I can understand more debates taking place. I cannot understand why we have to thrust it at young children. And I think if you ask the parents, they'd be hostile to it. And what about the role the teacher has to play in all this?
Society has been one way, the pendulum is swinging the other way, and they're pushing it very far in order to kind of proliferate change. And this is probably the toughest period in that evolutionary process, because the LGBTQ+ community is saying that you've got to really rage against the machine to get people to listen. Because put it like this now, even this conversation, the whole country is listening, the whole world is listening. These are the kinds of eyeballs and ears they haven't had before. And there's going to be friction. There's going to be a locking of heads in the process to getting to a point where you establish a new equilibrium where they feel more incorporated. Like I've said, the greatest force of allies that the LGBTQ+ community has always had is heterosexual women. What you're moving towards now is doing things that is beginning to turn them from allies into people who feel that, oh, for you to thrive, I'm being deprived, and that's a problem. When they realize you're alienating allies, they will understand you've got to recalibrate to have that kind of understanding between both parties.
Good evening. If you've just tuned in, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Aquarium, in for Patrick Christie tonight. Now, this is an exclusive. Trans dart player Noah Lynn van Leuven hit the headlines when she won a women's tournament in March, 8 days after beating male rivals in a mixed event. Now, van Leuven began transitioning from male to female in 2022 and was the first trans woman to play in a televised tournament in 2023. But her rival, British darts legend and former world #1, Dita Hedman, is leading the fight to protect women's sports after forfeiting her quarter-final match because she refused to compete against a biological man. And she's maintained this position for the last 2 years. I'm pleased to say joining me now is Dita Hedman. Dita, thank you so much for joining me. It's really good to talk to you. First of all, just briefly, why did you get into darts? What's your background?
Well, I was born in Jamaica and I came to the UK in 1973. And to be fair, I didn't know anything about darts, but my brothers were here, so they were into it, and that's how I got into it. And I just love playing this sport. And each level I just set myself and just progress and see where I could go.
Well, you've done really well. Now, of course, with this particular match, there was speculation that you pulled out of the Denmark Open, which is what the tournament was, over illness, to protect your record or something like that. Could you just set the record straight on why you pulled out of that?
Yes, the famous Mr. Phil Bars reported that on Twitter, as you just said, that I've pulled out because of ill health. No, I didn't pull out because of ill health. After I finished my game and I waited for my notification, and when it came and I saw I was playing Noah Lynn, because from, as I said, the last few years, I've struggled with this situation of playing a transgender. And in more than one occasion, I've been wanting to pull out. And people have spoken to me not to do it, but in the end, it got to me and it was beginning to affect me physically and mentally. And the last tournament I was at, the ladies' series, I said to my other half, we're sitting there because on top of me struggling with that, I'm also on the board of the WDF as the athletes commissioner for all the players.
And what's that, WDF? Is that the women's?
It's the World Darts Federation.
Oh, the World Darts Federation.
And obviously I brought this to their attention, the transgender, PDC, but all the ladies who do participate in the women's game has been complaining that they didn't enjoy the experience. They've been asking me to take it up to the board to see if they can have it change. We'll just look into so much. I've read so many things, and in fairness, it just hurt my head.
Yeah.
And the last ladies' series, I sat there and so many girls was coming to me telling me this, that and whatever. And I just sat there and just put my head back, put my headphone in, and was absolutely crying my eyes out.
See, that's the thing. People don't think of the impact that it has on the women who then have to play a trans athlete. In this particular occasion, it's a man who is now a woman, a trans woman. But she, I have to call Van Leuven as she, went through this sort of stringent of tests, apparently, to play in this particular darts competition and to play against women. Why is that not good enough? I mean, what are the big advantages that a biological man will have over a woman in darts?
Well, a lot of people, not everybody, there's some that says there's no advantages or there's no disadvantages, if you like. But what they've all seems to have forgotten is about the biological woman, this stuff that we have to go through every month. OK, so not everybody have every period. Some do. I've sat there and seen girls, women, who's doubled up in pain. At all the tournaments I go to. Now, a trans man won't have that. I go through the menopause. And funny enough, sitting out there, I just had one of them. They won't have that.
Trans woman,
yeah. But they tend to seem sort of dismiss what a natural-born woman go through. And also, in our research that I've done with my partner, I've just flipped that, just reading so many, as I said, I've read so much stuff on it, is that our testosterone level, they're allowed to be twice the amount we are. Now, to me, in my eyes, rightly or wrongly, I just felt, OK, if you want to be a woman and there's no difference between a transgender and a natural-born woman, then we should be at the same level. So if there's no difference, why they're twice the size as a woman? Now, I need somebody to explain that to me. But as I said, in Denmark, it just got to me and I just couldn't deal with it. Because I just broke down.
Yeah, because you went to speak to your tour director, didn't you?
I went to have a word with the tournament director and to have a private conversation away from everyone. It was just me and the tournament director, Carson. And I explained to him, I've had my notification, as you can see, and I just said, I can't do it, I can't cope. I said, I'm just breaking right now. And I just dissolved into pieces. And
you bravely refused to play. Yeah. So what's the implications now then? Does Noah-Lynn then win if you don't play?
Of course,
That's it. And what you know? Because what would you like to see happen?
Well, I would like to see, to be fair, I would not like to see anybody not play the sport they enjoy. But for me, I am also fighting for the girls that are out there that won't have that opportunity. Because if we leave it and bury our head in the sand, there won't be anything for young women and young girls to aspire to. And that's one of the things that I feel strongly about, because I've fought for a young girls' World Championship, which has been 2 years. Now, if we allow the transgender thing to happen, who's saying that young boys won't decide to start playing in the young girls? Or, OK, they have their own tournament. And I would say, to me, where I can see forward is probably have an open for trans, non-binary, and whoever wants to play that. But why would you have a ladies' section all these years and the men's section a girls section and a boys section if there was no difference.
This should just be, you could have both, then you could have an open category where somebody who's trans can go and play in that. It doesn't seem, you know, I don't see why this person needs to play against women. But listen, Tita, thank you so much for giving me your time, explaining your story, and I really respect you for actually being prepared to forego your own potential of winning for your principles.
Yeah, because one of the things they say, inclusivity and fairness, but you can't have both.
Yeah, and yet you're the one that's been excluded. Dita, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
It's really good to talk to you. That, of course, is a darts player, Dita Hedman. Well, Noah Lynn van Leuven recently told the Netherlands outlet NOS, I don't really feel the need to go further into it. This has been their choice and not mine. I think the only unfortunate thing about this issue is that a lot of people forget that I am also a human being. On the 25th of April, the World Darts Federation released a statement outlining their position, which read, the WDF believes in equal opportunity for all people to participate in the sport of darts as athletes, coaches, officials, staff and other volunteers. However, in instances where a transgender individual wishes to compete, the WDF will consider eligibility guidelines to ensure a fair and level playing field for all participants. Well, coming up is Sir Keir Starmer making a massive mistake by ditching the Rwanda deal, our only deterrent for turning away illegal migrants. Don't miss my take at 10. But next, who gave Prince Harry and Meghan Markle the right to go on a royal tour?
It is fantastic to be here in Nigeria with you all and to be here at the school for our first visit.
I'll get the blistering reaction of royal biographer Tom Bower. He won't be pulling his punches. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Nana Akua, only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, you know, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. You know, it just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pensions Scheme." The fight for these veterans and their families lives on because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good evening. This is Patrick Christys tonight, only on GB News with me, Nana Aquare. Now, after getting spectacularly snubbed by the King this week, Prince Harry met his wife, Meghan Markle, at Heathrow Airport as the pair flew to Nigeria for a 72-hour tour. Now, that was earlier today. They attended the inaugural Mental Health Summit at the Lightweight Academy in Nigeria, a school that is a beneficiary of their Archwell Foundation. And with mental health highly stigmatised in the country, the couple then shared these words with the students.
Hello everybody, it is fantastic to be here in Nigeria with you all and to be here at the school for our first visit. Hi.
But as I look around this room, I see myself in all of you as well.
So if you take anything away from today, just know that mental health affects every single person in the entire world.
You'd think about the mental health of his parents, but his father, of course, the King, and the rest of his family. But are Harry and Meghan strong global ambassadors for the royal family? To shed light on this, I'm joined by royal biographer and journalist Tom Bower. Tom, so they didn't want to be royal, as in he's royal by blood, but he didn't want to do royal duties. But surely this is like a sort of mock royal tour.
Yes, it is. It's a pretty nauseating one too, because this is all part of promoting the brand Sussex. And of course, the casualties and victims of their selfish touring is the British royal family and Britain itself. I mean, this interference in Nigeria, a country which is a very important member of the Commonwealth, by the Sussexes, who damned the Commonwealth in their notorious Netflix series, is really quite yet another milestone in their intention to snub and to humiliate the British royal family in Britain. And it's rather sad, isn't it?
Well, I mean, they would argue this is part of... So they had the Archwell Foundation, and this is one of the charities that is a beneficiary for the foundation. Although I didn't think that much money had sort of... that the accounts on that foundation didn't appear to have very much money. So I'm curious about this one.
Well, I mean, it didn't. I think they gave Nigerians something like £20,000 a pittance. No, this is all about promoting the brand, and this is all about their own selfish endeavours to actually assert themselves as terribly important people. And they've got a problem with that because they're not very important. But the only thing they do have is their names and their connections to the royal family. And thankfully, the King refused to meet Harry when he was in London this week, because that would have only been used by Harry to promote himself in Nigeria. And of course, Meghan herself couldn't even take the courtesy, let alone dare, leave Heathrow Airport and appear in London because she didn't want to be booed, probably.
Well, of course, I mean, as you mentioned, that's true. They haven't really got anything left. I mean, well, what is left of what they can actually sell and promote themselves? Meghan's got her jam, which this is not American Riviera Orchard. Doesn't appear to have doesn't appear to have done anything positive. I don't hear much coming out from America about it that is good. I mean, what are people thinking there?
Well, I think for Americans, those who take an interest in the Sussexes, and I think by now it's a diminishing number, are bemused by it all. They can't understand. But you've got to remember another part about all this. As far as Meghan is concerned, she's playing the race card. She has said that her mother's ancestors left Nigeria probably as slaves. She, in her Netflix series, damned the British royal family as racist. It was an outrageous lie. And she is using this to assert her credentials in America as some sort of ambassador or leader or influencer of the black community there. It's all very, very nasty. It's all self-interest. And of course, today we read that Princess Anne has completed 450 engagements in Britain. And there's poor Kate suffering from her illnesses. And Meghan is parading herself in Nigeria with all the things I've now described in the most really appalling manner, exploiting her marriage, and Harry having betrayed his family in the most outrageous way in his book and in the Netflix series. It really is a shockingly sad moment for the British royal family and for Britain itself.
Well, of course, she would argue that she's not playing the race card at all. And in fact, she later on they said that it was unconscious bias and that nobody said the word racism at all. And then Harry said that nobody in the family was racist. This is after allowing everybody to think that there was some sort of racism going on for some 2 years, and the Queen went to her death not knowing this. But of course, Meghan is not here to defend herself, so she would probably argue those things. What is next for these two? Because I know there's a polo thing coming out with Harry.
Well, hang on. She sent it to Netflix. It's on video. She told the world that there had been a racist slur against the unborn Archie. So don't let us fall into the trap of rewriting history because it now suits Meghan to change history. We know exactly what she said because she said it, as did Harry in that interview. I think that they really are grovelling now because there's polo, there's jam, there's some Netflix series about cooking. I can tell you that in my book about Meghan, the only thing that Meghan could cook was spaghetti bolognese and a steak on a barbecue. She knows nothing about cooking. The whole thing is just contrived. She's struggling for an identity.
Well, listen, Tom, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. It is a hodgepodge of things. Lovely to talk to you. That is Tom Bauer. Next, it's Sir Keir Starmer. Right or wrong to scrap the Rwanda plan? My panel are fired up on this one. And this is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Nana Akwe, only on GB News. Now, let's get an update with your weather with Alex Deacon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The warm weather will continue into the weekend. For many, another cracking day tomorrow. If you like, it's sunny, but we are in for a change by Sunday in the west, where we could well see some thunderstorms. In the east, it's mist and low cloud that's just dribbling back in from the North Sea, turning things fairly murky for the start of the weekend across eastern England. But elsewhere, long clear spells, decent night for spotting the aurora. There is a chance, particularly across the northern half of the UK. Not too chilly either. Temperatures mostly holding up in double digits, certainly in towns and cities. And a fine sunny start then to come on Saturday. The main exception will be Lincolnshire down through to Cambridgeshire. The London area may well start a bit murky, but by mid to late morning, that mist and low cloud will have cleared. Just a potential for it to affect some eastern coast of England at times. And we'll see cloud bubbling up through the day with one or two scattered, but potentially heavy showers over central and northern Scotland. But most will stay dry and fine and warm with temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Sunday's still pretty warm. A bit more of that mist and low cloud, particularly in eastern Scotland. So some har on that Aberdeenshire coast especially. Greater chance of seeing a few more showers breaking out across the Highlands, but more particularly further south, across the west of Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and Western England. Some thunderstorms potentially on Sunday afternoon. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Another warm one, and where it stays fine and sunny in the east, we could get to 26 or 27.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox, and I won the Great British Giveaway. I'd say, why not? What is it? The price of a text and £2 to enter. And if I can win it, anybody can win it. And they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Nana Acquia.
Tackle this problem at source and replace the Rwanda policy permanently.
Yeah, Starmer's naive plan to stop the small boats is a threat to British security. And...
Do you think this might be a bit fascist? Just a little bit fascist?
Palestine!
No? Okay.
Palestine!
Do we need to send the police into universities to break up the Gaza protest camps? Plus...
Starmer and the opportunity-destroying, aspiration-hating Labour Party.
Boris Johnson is taking the fight back to Labour. I've got all of tomorrow's newspapers in front pages for you with my panel. Former BBC political correspondent John Sargent and political commentators Joanna Jarju and Alex Armstrong. Oh, and what gives Harry and Meghan the right to go on what looks like a royal tour in Nigeria? Get ready, Britain. Here we go. A Labour government will open the floodgates for illegal migrants. That's next.
Very good evening to you. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 10. A look at the headlines from the newsroom this hour. A man convicted of the murder of a police officer in Bradford in 2005 will spend a minimum of 40 years behind bars. 38-year-old Sharon Beshanivsky was killed when she interrupted a raid at a travel agent's. She'd only been a police officer for 9 months at the time. Piran Ditta Khan, who's 75, masterminded that armed robbery and spent 15 years on the run. He's the last of 7 men involved to be convicted. Retired detective Andy Brennan described Ditta Khan as a violent man.
The reason why he's here at 75 years of age is on the basis that he decided to flee the country in order to try and make good his escape and avoid being held responsible and accountable for his part in what had taken place. And let's be absolutely clear, he is clearly the one person that was responsible for organising and planning this and making sure that those that went in there had firearms and loaded firearms in that case.
We've heard today that the UK is officially out of recession after better than expected growth at the start of the year. The Office for National Statistics estimates GDP rose by 0.6% from January to March. Predictions were suggesting 0.4%. Rishi Sunak says the figures suggest the economy has real momentum, but Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves accuses the Conservatives of being out of touch.
If you look at this Prime Minister's record, since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, the economy is still £300 worse off per person in the country. So these numbers today are not deserving of the victory lap that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt seem to want to go on.
An ex-prisoner obsessed with the Hunger Games has been handed an indefinite hospital order for what a judge described today as the senseless and savage killing of a grandfather. Thomas O'Halloran was riding his mobility scooter in West London when Lee Byer stabbed him. 5 days before the killing, Byer, who had a string of convictions, was released from Wormwood Scrubs, having served a full 12-year sentence for robbery. Police say the motiveless attack has left the 87-year-old's family shocked and horrified. Scotland's new First Minister, John Swinney, has admitted that it's legally impossible, he says, to implement controversial gender recognition reforms. In 2022, MSPs voted to pass a bill making it simpler for people to change their gender without having to obtain a medical diagnosis. The legislation would have also reduced the minimum age at the time required for someone to live in their chosen gender. The campaigners argue the move is the wrong one, and they say it could affect protections for women and girls. Two elderly Just Stop Oil protesters this afternoon took a hammer and chisel to the glass case that protects the Magna Carta at the British Library. The vicar and the retired biology teacher, who are both in their 80s, also held up a banner claiming that the government is breaking its own climate laws before gluing themselves to the display. Scotland Yard says 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of criminal damage. And as we heard from Nana at the top of the show, Prince Harry's Nigerian tour is continuing today, having spent a brief couple of days here in the UK. Greeted by cheers and dancing, the Duke of Sussex spent time with wounded soldiers, reaffirming his commitment to supporting veterans. In Abuja, alongside his wife Meghan, he also visited Lightweight Academy, a charity promoting mental health awareness. The couple are hoping their first trip to the African nation will help strengthen ties after Nigeria expressed interest in hosting the Invictus Games in 2029. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts. You can scan the QR code on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Sir Keir Starmer set his stall out today. The Labour leader is hell-bent on scrapping the only deterrent stopping illegal migrants from pouring in over our southern border. Yes, he wants to do away with the Tories' Rwanda plan, calling it a gimmick and a waste of money.
£600 million for a few hundred removed. That is gesture politics. And Britain can do better. Labour will do better. We will end this farce. We will restore serious government to our borders, tackle this problem at source, and replace the Rwanda policy permanently.
So what is Sir Keir Starmer's great master plan, I hear you ask? Smash the gangs, of course. We know he wants to label the people smugglers as terrorists. And in a rare policy announcement, he spelled out plans for a new border security command made up of MI5 agents, border force officers, police specialist investigators and prosecutors.
Good ambition is never enough on its own. But I've seen how, with determination, with leadership, with single-minded focus, agencies can work together and deliver results. And not just within one country either. We can cooperate across borders, and that's not some kind of weakness. It's absolutely essential.
But could he be any more naive? We're already paying France almost £500 million. And for what? And if migrants in Italy decide to make the journey to Northern Europe, is Giorgia Meloni going to stop them? On this very show earlier in the week, we spoke to 2 illegal migrants camping in tents in West London. Listen to what they had to say about the threat of being deported to Rwanda.
You would rather go to Sudan than Rwanda?
Rwanda, Sudan. Me Sudanese. Go Sudan. No go Rwanda.
Why you go Rwanda?
Rwanda my one country. What doing Rwanda?
Yes, everybody is scared about Rwanda. Everybody not right about this. Everybody say that. That's not right. If I come from my country, your country, why you send me another country? Another country, different language, different legend, different everything. Why?
So it was revealed today that deportation flights could be set to take off in just 6 weeks. But from day one of a Labour government, the deterrent would go up in smoke. Starmer says that the Tories are currently offering a Cinderella service at our borders. But Labour are at it as well, and this plan to stop the boats is the stuff of fairy tales. Well, let's get the thoughts of my panel. Joining me, former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, political commentators Joanna Jardou and Alex Armstrong. I was a little bit quicker this time. I got the wall faster. Alex Armstrong, Sir Keir Starmer, his plan, he's going to scrap Rwanda, even if it is working. That's what he says.
Well, there will be no deterrent, will there? I mean, we just saw it on the VT there. There's 2 guys saying, I would rather go back to my home country than go to Rwanda. What does that tell you? If that message is broadcast to people coming over the channel, then they won't make that trip in the first place and put their lives in danger. So this Rwanda plan could end up saving lives, which Keir Starmer obviously isn't mentioning. Funnily enough as well, there will be no deportations under Keir Starmer's new plan. plan. And it sounds like this new command unit is very similar to the one that Oxford University have also highlighted, which is the current small boats operational command that exists today. Well, this already works. This is already in place. So what is new here is that he's saying MI5 are going to get involved. Well, what are they going to do? Go into a foreign country and start an illegal war and start going after these gangs undercover? I mean, come on. This whole plan that Keir Starmer's got sounds strong and it sounds tough because he's using words like MI5, James Bond. It sounds very sexy, but it's not going to deliver. Even Oxford University saying it's unlikely to be a game changer. And on top of that, we've lost our deterrent.
Joanna Darcy. At the end of the day, it does up the ante a bit if you do get MI5 involved. I'm not saying that there aren't already things in place, but obviously if you're a sitting government and you can call upon different forces within the country and also have that autonomy and influence potentially to sit around the table with other partners across Europe, for example, then it could potentially work. And I just think that, you know, you've got to start by actually tackling this at the root rather than, for me, I feel like Rwanda might work for a little bit. You know, I'm not kind of scared to admit that, but there's only a certain number of people that you can send to Rwanda. Well, and when you've got over 370 million...
But should he get rid of it, though? If you, as you said, it might work for a bit. Should he be saying that he's going to get rid of it? After all, if somebody fails asylum, there is no other country to send them to. So if they fail asylum, they can't be sent back to their home country. A third country will have to be part of the mix. Where is he planning to send people?
Well, I think that if he's a strategic leader and he actually tackles this the right way, then he will look at cost-benefit analysis. You know, he'll sit and think, OK, so it might work for a bit and it might work as a deterrent, but is it actually worth spending 370 million pounds on a small number of people?
This is the same Labour Party. You go, oh, Britain, the tiny little nation, that doesn't mean anything anymore. We're such a small little island, we need the international community. This is the same Labour Party saying that now we're going to be the ones to stop the small boats. Are we hell? We are not. Haven't got the according to Labour activists, to go into these countries in Africa and tackle these migration.
Is he making a valid point, though? He's talking about...
No, I think what he's doing, it's called politics, really. He's planning what's going to happen in 6 weeks' time when the first flights, we're told, are going to take place to Rwanda. Now, he's guessing, I think probably correctly, that it's going to be a messy business. There's going to be a tremendous amount of legal activity, a lot of demonstrations and so on. So instead of finding himself in that position where suddenly people would turn to him, what about you? What are you going to do? He will already prepared the ground. We also regard illegal immigration as an extremely important issue. We've been talking about it for 6 weeks. So, I mean, he's preparing that particular argument. And what the mistake is often to imagine that people are sort of taking all these things down, then they're saying, yes, but if he was in power. It's not to do with power. We're in the middle of an election campaign. It's in slow motion. But what you're seeing is a very careful, coordinated plan by Labour. You may think it's not coordinated. You may think it's not careful. But they're trying to lay down their position on the assumption that it's going to be a messy business. Now, I think that's pretty shrewd.
He is shrewd. He is very shrewd. But the point is that where is he going to send people who fail asylum? It's all very well in being shrewd and knowing that it's an election, so he's campaigning.
That's quite important.
Where is he going to send people?
He's not Prime Minister.
Back to their country. Like, he's not...
But not everybody can go back to their country. So if somebody fails asylum, so, for example, somebody from Afghanistan, you can't send them back to Afghanistan. So where will you send them? If you're going to get rid of Rwanda and a third country, where are they going to go?
But assuming that assumes...
I'm just asking Joanna. Joanna, answer that. Hold on. I'll come back to you.
But it assumes it's going to work, though. You're assuming it's going to work.
No. But you need a third country, so where will they go?
Well, I think that will be in very, very small cases. I think it's completely different.
Where will they go?
There'll be other opportunities for him to send people to other countries, but I think that argument, specifically talking about Rwanda, about people who haven't even been processed yet, that is different. When you make an illegal case for where you're going to send people and the third country, I think he'll be able to get that over the line without half the country even being able to notice where these people are going.
What's he going to do with the people he's currently got here as well? I mean, what's happening with them? Is he just going to, is it going to be an amnesty where they're just going to go through now?
No, you've got to, it's for the sake of argument, this is an election campaign where the leader of the opposition doesn't have to provide all the answers. He's not in charge. So there is a difference between what you're expecting of him and then saying, but what's he going to do in power, than what he's doing at the moment. He's in the middle, I think, of an election campaign. Now, there are different rules that apply to that, meaning he can't, in fact, pull levers of power. He's not in power. right? What he's got to do is to make sure that when the government stumbles, he pushes them further into the mud. That's what they... That's
but don't people want to know what he's going to do, Alex? Don't we want to know what they're doing?
We'll hopefully learn more with the manifesto.
Sure.
You know, that's his chance. I mean, we're still waiting for it, but, you know, I hope it comes, and I hope it does give detail, because there's a lot of detail missing here, frankly. There's not a lot of explaining. You're right, John, it's politics.
But there are details the government aren't giving us, you see.
Well,
we
of course,
don't know now.
I absolutely agree with you on that point.
No, we don't. We know very little about what's happening in 6 weeks' time.
Can I just tell you where they will go, though?
Where will they go?
They'll go exactly where Patrick found. They'll go onto the streets. They will get these tent cities like you're seeing in Paris, in Los Angeles, and other parts of the world. And the solution for mayors like Sadiq Khan is to build housing specifically for them, while the rest of us in London still can't afford to buy a home.
I actually think it's quite unfair for you to be asking specific countries of where these people are going, and I'd kind of echo John's point that his strategy, because it's his job at the moment in opposition, like you said, government in waiting, to set the strategy of how he actually wants to tackle the wider issue. But to kind of ask for specific countries when he's not even at the table yet to make these...
But he has had...
Well, you said where they're going to go.
He has been an opposition leader for quite a few years.
The question is, if it's not a specific country, where are they going to go? Is it going to be in this country? Is it going to... He needs to give us a bit more information. I think the British public need it. We want to know if you're going to scrap Rwanda. A lot of people are saying it's an OK scheme. If you're going to get rid of it, where are you going to... There's a big gap.
You're asking two completely different questions.
No, I'm asking one question.
No, because...
And I'm looking for an answer.
No, because Keir Starmer is tackling the question about people's processing before... People wanted to ship them off to Rwanda before they're even processed.
That is another question.
And you're asking the question about people who have actually failed their asylum. And that's two completely different things.
But it's still the same question. He needs to answer the question, whether it's one question or two different questions. He needs to answer some of these questions. Where's it going to go? Where's it going to go?
We do need to have
John Sargent, last word to you, because I've got
to... The point about it is that we still know so little about how many people are going to be pulled in, and they are at the moment. What's going to happen to the hunger strikers who are saying we're not going to eat anything? What's going to happen between now and 6 weeks on the first flight going? Now, what you mustn't do, particularly if you want to win an election, as Keir Starmer does, is throw everything in to the last question. Don't do that. Wait for it to play out.
He's not answering any questions, is he?
But it's, you know, you can say, oh, it's all naive, it's stupid. It isn't stupid. This is cleverly worked out.
I think it's quite naive, and I think that when Keir Starmer takes over, if he takes over, which I suspect he will, because John Curtis is never wrong, that if he takes over, we will all be asking him, where are they going to go? But coming up, I'll bring you the very first of tomorrow's front pages in the liveliest paper review that you'll get nowhere else than here on GB News. But next, after we've showed you how the Gaza protest camps can turn ugly.
One of the big criticisms of this camp has been that if you were visibly Jewish, that you wouldn't necessarily feel that welcome. And I think it's easy to understand why they might feel a bit like that.
Have our student campuses really become hotbeds for anti-Semitism? And should the police be brought in to disperse these camps? I'll get the lowdown from freedom fighter and associate professor of the University of Cambridge, James Orr. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Nana Akweer, on GB News.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
The International Monetary Fund has estimated that Russia will outgrow all advanced economies in 2024. This is in spite of all the sanctions the West has imposed on Russia, in spite of its removal of the SWIFT banking system, in spite of the fact that Germany has almost entirely weaned itself off Russian gas, and in spite of the 50,000 soldiers who have died and the endless resources it has poured into the Ukraine war. So, what are we missing here? Why is Russia going to grow more than the rest of us? Well, it's simple. Russia is willing to make use of its own energy resources to provide abundant supply to its citizens. Increased supply means lower prices, and cheap energy is inextricably linked to economic growth. But since 2008, the United States has grown at twice the rate of the United Kingdom. The big difference is that America has much lower energy prices, while the UK insists on masochistic green policies. But it's no surprise that the Green fanatics in the Scottish government, where they know how to be fanatics, have had to backtrack on their flagship greenhouse gas reduction target. The SNP has committed to reducing Scotland's CO2 emissions by 75% by 2030. Now, the Climate Change Committee has reviewed its policy and advised that the absurd reduction target is out of reach.
Can we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach? We must now act to chart a course to 2045.
It is time to recognise the truth that net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unaffordable. It's time we rid ourselves of this foolish and costly idea that will simply make people cold and poor. We need to prioritise cheap energy for Britain's consumers and for companies, for industry, enabling economic growth that will benefit us all.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
This is Patrick Christys, tonight with me, Nana Akwe, only on GB News. Now, university chancellors have told the Prime Minister to not make the Gaza protest camps a culture war for fear of escalating tensions. And this comes after Rishi Sunak's meeting with the Union of Jewish Students earlier this week, in which he called for universities to remain bastions of tolerance amid rising anti-Semitism on campus. Oxford and Cambridge universities have been particularly vocal about their support for Palestine. And GB News went to Oxford University yesterday to see what it was all about.
Everyone's linked arms to try to force us, I think, out. It's a bastion of freedom of speech, Oxford University. Do you think this might be a bit fascist? Is this a little bit fascist?
Palestine!
No? OK.
Now, the government has repeatedly told university heads that they should be ready to contact their local police forces if potential criminality is detected. And over in America, more than 100 pro-Palestinian protesters were arrested at Columbia University in New York last month as cops tried to get the situation under control. So should we be sending police in to break up the UK camps, or would this only make the martyrs of the woke Oxford students? Well, I'm joined now by Associate Professor of Philosophy and Religion at the University of Cambridge, James Orr. James, thank you very much for joining me. Look, I'm all for freedom of speech, but a lot of these protests appear to be going just that little bit too far, where it becomes intimidatory. Do you feel that they're crossing a line here, or do you feel that these protests are perfectly acceptable in the way they're being conducted?
Well, good to be with you, Nana. I think one's got to just take these protests on a kind of case-by-case basis. I mean, we saw some footage there of what happened in Colombia, where the riot police really did need to be called in. There was clear evidence of criminal damage. Hamilton Hall, that beautiful hall at Columbia, was being effectively ransacked. The protesters were not treating the building respectfully at all. They were acting disruptively. They were harming the ordinary processes of the university, of learning, of exams, and so on and so forth. My impression of the protests and the encampments in Cambridge and Oxford is that they've been a little bit less disruptive. And so, I'm very committed to academic freedom and free speech, as I know some of my colleagues are, maybe not all of them. So I would err on the side of caution, and I think I'd be reluctant to suggest that, at least as the protests stand, they warrant any kind of heavy-handed reaction from the police. And of course, I'm not even sure that the university authorities would even think of bringing in the police. I mean, we saw a couple of years ago when Just Stop Oil dug up the turf of Trinity College. The police were simply observing them, and Trinity College had said that they were absolutely happy for the criminal damage to proceed. And I think it's a very difficult balance. But as things stand, there has been some evidence of Jewish students feeling intimidated. I think probably a police reaction would be over the top, and yes, may risk creating martyrs where really there shouldn't be martyrs at all. I mean, I should say I was barricaded into the Cambridge Union, the famous debating chamber here at the University of Cambridge on Wednesday night. We had a very distinguished speaker in who was speaking very intelligently about a whole range of issues. He'd not spoken very much on Israel and Palestine, but there were, I think, about 150 protesters out there screaming so loud that it was very difficult for any kind of discussion to happen at all. So I think, where the sort of exercise of free speech becomes so disruptive that the free speech of others is undermined, then one does start to get into difficulties, and one wonders why institutions have not been a little bit more robust and resilient in their responses. But I think as things stand, at least the protests that I've seen here in Cambridge, I mean, one of the protesters walking past the other day offered me a cup of tea and a sandwich, which I thought was a very English way of doing a student protest. Maybe it's a little bit more aggressive over in Oxford. But I think the deeper concern, Nana, is really just how uninformed a lot of the protesters are. They seem to have very little understanding of the complexities of the history of Palestine. To accuse Israel of genocide, simply to chant that, and without any real justification or substantiation, I think is the deeper problem. It suggests that their intellectual formation, their understanding of the complexities of the world, is not what it ought to be.
Well, and these are supposedly the great minds who are going to be leading our country forward. But you make a very good point as well. It's when it's restricting other people's freedom, it's the impact on the other students. But also, as you very rightly said, exactly, they don't even know, half of them, what they're protesting for. Thank you so much. It's really good to talk to you, Associate Professor of Philosophy and Religion at the University of Cambridge. That's James Orr. Thank you very much for speaking to me here on GB News. Coming up, Boris Johnson launches a surprise attack on Sir Keir Starmer.
Starmer and the opportunity-destroying, aspiration-hating Labour Party.
The Eton-educated former Prime Minister coming in to bat for private schools there. But do you agree with him? And my panel tackle that. The next we'll go through tomorrow's front pages in the Hot Press Review. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Nana Akwe, only on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The warm weather will continue into the weekend. For many, another cracking day tomorrow. If you like, it's sunny, but we are in for a change by Sunday in the west, where we could well see some thunderstorms. In the east, it's mist and low cloud that's just dribbling back in from the North Sea, turning things fairly murky for the start of the weekend across eastern England. But elsewhere, long clear spells, decent night for spotting the aurora. There is a chance, particularly across the northern half of the UK. Not too chilly either. Temperatures mostly holding up in double digits, certainly in towns and cities. And a fine sunny start then to come on Saturday. The main exception will be Lincolnshire down through to Cambridgeshire. The London area may well start a bit murky, but by mid to late morning, that mist and low cloud will have cleared. Just the potential for it to affect some eastern coast of England at times. And we'll see cloud bubbling up through the day with one or two scattered, but potentially heavy showers over central and northern Scotland. But most will stay dry and fine and warm with temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Sunday's still pretty warm. A bit more of that mist and low cloud, particularly in eastern Scotland. So some ha on that Aberdeenshire coast especially. Greater chance of seeing a few more showers breaking out across the Highlands, but more particularly further south, across the west of Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and Western England. Some thunderstorms potentially on Sunday afternoon. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Another warm one, and where it stays fine and sunny in the east, we could get to 26 or 27.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. This is Patrick Christys tonight, only on GB News with me, Nana Akwe. And it's time now to bring you tomorrow's news tonight in the most entertaining paper review on telly. The very first front pages have just been delivered for my press pack. Right, so we've got the front cover of The Eye, which talks about the Treasury is working on a 2p Tory tax giveaway in September, so it doesn't sound like they're going to have the election by then. Also, you've got The Express, that's positive. The UK will soon be back to full strength. A lot of people talking about how the economy is going. Jeremy Hunt saying how upbeat things are. Then we've got the Daily, The Times. The Times is talking about the private schools. Of course, we had a little clip of Boris Johnson. This is because Keir Starmer's robbing Peter to pay Paul policy. And then the Daily Mail, there's that lovely Andrew Pearce on the top of the front cover there. But the economy is going gangbusters, so good news again for the economy. The UK economy is going gangbusters after growing at the fastest rate in 2 years. I think it was 0.6%. So that sounds all very good. So joining me, my brilliant panel, John Sargent, Joanna Jarju, and also Alex Armstrong. Joanna Jarju, the economy is going gangbusters.
I just think, what a load of rubbish, honestly.
Is it?
Yeah, I just think, you know, it might be factually true, you know, we might have turned a corner, like what Jeremy Hunt was saying, but I think to the average person, it's like when they say, oh, inflation's going down and they want to take, you know, all the credit for it. But then you go shopping and you go into your local supermarket and prices are still high, food prices especially. So I just don't think that it kind of paints the picture that they want to paint. It's almost as if they're scrambling now, clutching at straws, trying to find some sort of good news story. But I think the public only care if the good news story actually translates into their shopping baskets and their wallets.
Well, in a way, it would do, surely, John, the fact that if inflation is coming down, obviously not rising as fast as it was, although it's still rising, but it's not as fast, that means more money in our pockets. That's got to be a good thing, surely.
Yeah,
and one of Rishi's pledges.
Except that, unfortunately, tax is going up over the next 2 years. That's all agreed. So whatever happens, we're all going to be paying more in tax. Now, the question of, is there growth in the economy? Of course it's good news. You know, of course it's something that everyone should be hoping for, if it was coupled with a sense of, can we improve productivity? I mean, that is, and what about the sort of per head figure rather than the overall figure? So, yeah, it's OK, good news, but frankly, we're still bumbling along.
Alex?
You know, I can't get excited about 0.6%, Nana. I mean, I always welcome good news about Britain. It's nice to see we're coming out of recession. I welcome all of those things. And I do think there's a more positive feeling about the economy in the country. You've seen people recruiting going on again, business picking up. But 0.6%, is that the best we can do, Nana? Come on. We've got to get some growth in this country. And I would love to see the Tories go back to their roots, cut taxes, be conservative, genuinely cut tax.
Well,
but cut it where it matters.
But the Eye is reporting the Treasury is working on a 2p tax cut giveaway in September. That's good, right?
What they should do is change the banding of taxes. I think that would be a lot more actually productive in terms of changing people's lives. But I think just going on this massive tour of saying we've turned a corner, look, it's just disingenuous and it's gaslighting.
Joanna
really
wants Liz Truss level tax cuts. That's what I'm here for.
No, I
yes,
think
you do. You just
change the bans, not try to do this trickle down that clearly does not work and made most people worse off.
I like it when Rishi Sunak says we've turned a corner, and you say, yeah, you turn a corner, turn a corner, turn a corner, and we're back where we started.
Yeah. True.
Well, I think good news is good news. I mean, look, come on, let's not knock him. He's got one of his pledges has come to light, but let's be honest, the Tory party have behaved in a disastrous manner. It's almost indefensible. I can't say anything. I mean, it's not. I don't want to be party political here. I'm just looking at all the evidence, and they're like rats leaving a sinking ship. Right, now, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has attacked Sir Keir Starmer's private school tax pledge. The Labour leader wants to increase VAT at independent schools by 20% in a bid to raise £1.7 billion and spend it on improving standards in state schools. Now, here's what Boris Johnson thinks about this plan.
I was a scholarship boy at my school and very proud of it. And I have to ask, what kind of a politician is it that sets out to make it more difficult for schools to offer exactly the kind of scholarships and bursaries that gave him such a crucial leg up in life? And the answer, of course, is Keir Starmer and the opportunity-destroying, aspiration-hating Labour Party.
Aspirating, hating Labour Party. Is that fair, John?
Well, there's certainly something in the sense of if you think it's a great idea to wreck good schools, then it's a great idea to put VAT on. I mean, there is a problem here, and it's a bit depressing, isn't it? The idea that, you know, if you say, look, we've got some of the best universities in the world, they're being fed by some brilliant schools, just forget for a moment who goes to them and why. For people like me, who was on a scholarship like Boris was, I went to a private school. My father was a teacher there, so I was there for 100 quid a year. But the point about it is that we were very keen on learning, and we weren't particularly keen when we left about making money. I mean, it was that class of people who were just, in fact, rather academic, and I was rather academic, almost monkish we were, you know, as a class. But that's then transferred into, you're going to earn lots of money. I never earned lots of money.
Yeah, but so, I mean, the bottom line is, though, what he's talking about is making people at public schools, or private schools even, pay VAT, which, and I think in his assumption, he's presuming that the same number of people will carry on being in these schools, that he's worked out how much money he's going to make from these same people being in these schools. Half of these people, if his calculations are wrong, a lot of these people are going to flee because they can't afford it, Alex.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And it's the same economic principle you apply to taxing the rich. They all evacuate the country and then they take their money with them. So that you put extra tax on things and people then go, what do we do? Because that money's certainly not going to be going to public schools. Which, if he would focus his policy on saying we need to level up, we need to build more schools, we need to build better schools, that's really the argument I want to be hearing. Not I'm going to just tax education. It's ridiculous.
Well, the other assumption is that a lot of the people that go to these schools are actually quite wealthy, which isn't the case, actually. I mean, Joanna, I went to one of those schools, but that's because my parents' company did it, my dad's company did this, and then I was able to go, then they paid for me. I mean, a lot of people, these schools also are special needs schools as well.
Yeah, I mean, then some of them might not be wealthy, but, you know, they can afford it, just about. And I think that...
Not 20%.
No, but I think that especially when it comes
to... talking about inflation, remember?
No, but I think that when it comes to something like children's education, parents will find a way to get themselves in.
They will.
They will. They will find the money to do it. And my problem with this is that I don't think that when it comes to education, they should be given any type of special treatment. At the end of the day, it is a private school. It is something that you pay for. So if you're paying for it, I don't think that there's anything particularly wrong with having a tax on that, like you would on other schools.
OK, so my old school, Newhall, check it, they actually send a minibus out to get all the older people. So my mum gets on this minibus along with lots of other people, and they take them to have a lunch at the school, and the students all help out. They give them a free meal for the afternoon. It's a wonderful afternoon out for my mum and her friends, and she goes, I'm at Newhall now. She's telling me what she's doing, and I met so-and-so, and I've made them all watch your programme. Do you know what I mean? And these schools do a lot. They took on a lot of scholarship students as well. So I think it's the people who will suffer, it's going to make a bigger divide over the rich and the poor.
But has he also categorically said that some of this money isn't going to go back into state schools, as he categorically kind of ruled that out, because I think that that's also important. Like we were saying before about them being a government in waiting, they haven't necessarily earmarked every single bit of extra funding and extra taxes, whether it's from non-dom, whether it's from VAT with private schools. And I think that that's also important, because we have to have a wider conversation about the education system in this country. I'm a trustee of a multi-academy trust, and I see how state schools struggle, especially when we were going through the energy prices.
But why doesn't he try and fix the actual state schools rather than destroying the ones...
You don't want to do that for free, are you?
School is fantastic, and if we were actually devolved some powers to schools to run the schools properly, not be having this instituted way of running things, this broad sort of Labour policy applied to all schools, they do a lot better, as Catherine Birbalsing's school has been. But, you know, I'm also thinking here about the teachers that go to these private schools as well. They're fantastic teachers. They are experts. So what are we going to do? Disencourage a whole generation of teachers who can go, actually, here is the cap of what I can do. I can't go further than that. I'll have to go to Australia. And I guarantee Australia will be going, come here, come to our country like they are to our doctors.
Yeah, the advantages that private schools have is they can just sack the teachers. They can just say, I'm sorry. And kids, who, if you're not behaving properly, that's it, goodbye. Well, now, this is all unfair privilege and so on, but it does mean an awful lot of good schooling is taking place. That, you know, this is... and I think of some of the people that I knew and some of the people my kids were in private schools, and they were amazing people.
Absolutely.
But isn't he going to...
Amazing teachers, amazing people.
But isn't he
mainly, they were just being quiet.
But it's going to make a bigger divide over the rich who can afford these schools and the poor who can't. That's all that's going to happen.
I suspect people like me will go on saving and...
I think that there's going to be a wider... I think there's going to be a wider strategy when it comes to education. I think that obviously Keir Starmer has identified certain things, even when it comes to oracy skills and just creating task forces around education. So I think that it doesn't stop here. Obviously, this is the headline. This is the thing that people are annoyed about this week.
I think perhaps he should fix the state sector first before he starts taking...
But you know what really makes me angry about this, and it's always Labour politicians, is that you get people like Diane Abbott and other Emily Thornberry, I think, as well, who send their kids to private schools and then say, no, you can't have that same access that I had. I really dislike that, and the British public dislike that too.
Well, listen, Joanna Chaju, John Sargent and also Alex Armstrong, thank you. That's my amazing panel. Coming up, Greta Thunberg joins the mass protests against Israel's Eurovision singer. But after claims that she was once bullied by the public, has she herself turned into the bully? We thrashed that out with tonight's Greatest Britain and unit, Jackass. But plus, I've got more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages to show you, and my panel debate if Harry and Meghan should be in Nigeria acting like working royals. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Nana, a queer only, on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this is a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
Good evening. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Nana Akwe, only on GB News. It's time to return to the liveliest paper review on the telly. And more front pages have been delivered hot off the press. Right, now this one is on the Daily Telegraph. Kinnock voters not in love with Sir Keir Starmer. Now, voters are worried that actually this could end up as a 1992 moment when, of course, the Labour Party were leading and then suddenly they lost to John Major.
Yeah,
now, John Sargent, you know all of that.
They are now. That's the point to bear in mind. So, although it was a surprise and John Major did very well against, everyone assuming he was going to lose, and of course, what people forget about the whole saga is that Labour had promised to put up taxes, and that even issued with the shadow budget everyone's salary and how much extra they would pay or what they would gain. So it was everyone, we were all following them around. We all knew in the political correspondence, we knew we were all going to lose. So I mean, that was the tax bombshell. So although people look back on it and say, oh, there was a soapbox and good old John Major, it was the old thing of absolutely be careful about promising to put up taxes. It doesn't go down well.
Yeah, Kinnock made that famous speech as well, which went down really badly, where he was shaking his fists in the air and he looked like a real socialist.
It's all right.
And it went down terribly with the British public at the time.
But they were looking for an excuse.
Water as well at the beach.
I think, yes, something like
that. That was before.
What I'm hearing from this and the differences is that there were gaffes, there were things that were said in speeches, whereas Keir Starmer, apart from the Israel thing at the beginning after the October 7th attacks, I think that's the only. Yeah, but I don't think people care about that as much. I think that the Palestine movement.
Oh no, you're wrong.
I think but I think the Palestine.
Yeah,
you do.
99.9% of the public dislike that.
Yeah, 99.9% of women don't have a penis.
But is it a reason? But is it a reason for them to actually vote again? I don't think that it's enough. I think the economy.
I think what we underestimate is the British people. We love common sense. We're infatuated with common sense, aren't we? We hate hypocritical politicians.
No, but I think that even with this story, with saying voters not in love with Starmer, I don't know whether sometimes it's a bit of delusion or a bit of, I don't know. It reminded me actually of last week being on the panel with Andrew Rosendale, and he was convinced that Susan Hall was going to win and Keir Starmer, it was going to be this big kind of gotcha moment. And I kind of feel like this is just similar to that.
I don't know. I think, listen, there's still time. That's why the Tory party are hanging on, literally, by a thread. They're going to drag this to the wire. Now, on the front cover of the Mirror, we've got Real Martha's Victim. I fear what she might do next. This is this baby reindeer thing. Do you remember Piers Morgan did an interview with this person who denied everything? I mean, what's your take on this baby reindeer scenario?
I watched the interview. It's really bonkers, isn't it, to see... I mean, it felt like we were being gaslit the entire time. She's like, I didn't know him. I knew him for a few weeks, and then the story would change
she's
slightly.
the stalker, isn't she? She's supposedly the stalker. But she's denied it all, though.
She's denying. She's saying that she's not denying that it's her being played as the character. She's denying that the things that Richard Gadd has alleged in the story that are her, clearly, aren't true. And she's trying to defend it, and I don't think it comes off too well.
But how do we know it's definitely her, though? I mean, what's the actual evidence that says...
We don't. And she's saying she's going to take him to court, which will be a new rematch. They'll have to make a new series. It'll be great.
But then the interesting thing is that before this even hit Netflix, she was saying, I knew it was about me straight away. So I'm kind of like thinking there were so many gotcha moments, actually, in that interview that I thought that maybe she could have been pressed a bit more on that.
Do you think Piers Morgan was a bit irresponsible interviewing people like this? Just clearly, in my view, suffering with some sort of perhaps mental illness. If do you think it's a bit out of order? Seeing as, although remember what happened to him when he walked off stage with the whole mental illness thing. But do you think that he should have, perhaps this wasn't a wise person to be interviewing?
I don't know. I didn't watch the programme, so I feel
it's on YouTube.
My old prejudices about him may come
out. It's on YouTube.
What are you going to say?
Obviously, he's got to focus on trending content now with his platform being solely digital. So, but I think that one of the reasons why maybe he didn't press her as much, he seemed quite tame compared to other interviews that he's done, is probably because he was aware of that fact. And it's obviously not a good look to have her on the platform to begin with. But then also to be seen as if he's really pressing and kind of, being being a bit too harsh on a woman that could potentially be vulnerable, that could just make it worse, right?
Well, right now, well, thank you for that. And now, after getting snubbed by the King this week, my favourite subject, Prince Harry met his wife Meghan at Heathrow Airport as the pair flew to Nigeria for a 72-hour tour. Now, earlier today, they attended the inaugural Mental Health Summit at the Lightway Academy in Nigeria, a school that is a beneficiary of their Archwell Foundation. So was King Charles right not to give Harry's PR campaign oxygen this week? Joanna Jarju, was he right?
I think...
If that is true.
I think it was disappointing, to be honest, you know, to hear that he didn't have any room within his schedule. And I actually really respect the Spencer family for showing up for him. I think that he could have at least sent one member of the family. You know, sometimes you've got to be the bigger person.
I mean, he's fighting
No, I'm not
cancer,
saying that he had to necessarily turn up, but I think that he's obviously sending a very kind of clear message. And I think that as the king, whether you agree with him or not, and if you're on Harry's side or his side, it would have just been nice for him to show that as the parent...
Would you not be worried?
You can't trust them, though, can you, John?
Yeah. I think the thing is that the king would have known that we were going to have this whole Nigeria experience. And just thought, oh, no, he's not. The idea, he comes to me in Buckingham Palace, next moment he's pretending he's a working royal again, with her, messing around in Nigeria, taking the salute, doing all this stuff.
He's not pretending he's a working royal.
But he isn't a working royal, Alex.
Well, no, he's not a working royal.
No, he's not a working royal.
But he's not pretending to be.
He is.
Look, do you know what I would be concerned about if I was the king, though? I mean, we've got to be honest about this. Every time something has been leaked about the King's health or other things in the past, when the Queen was obviously dying and Harry doing interviews and things like that.
Terrible.
Can you trust that what you tell him isn't then going to go back to his new Netflix documentaries and TV shows? I would be very concerned about that if I was the King of you know, the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. And frankly, I do understand why they've got distance from them. If Harry and Meghan want to come back as working royals and repair the relationship, I would welcome that.
I'd like to see
I find it so hypocritical because the King himself has written a book and he slated the Queen, talking about how she wasn't very affectionate, his childhood was like this, his childhood was like that. You've had Sarah Ferguson write a book, she's done an Oprah interview. So many of them have done exactly the same thing, and so many of them have capitalised off being associated with the royal family. Can I just make one point?
Make that point quick.
No, but then also there's the Queen's son. I can't remember his name, Andrew Parker Bowles or something like that. He's released a book, the monarchy of something, recipes.
Yeah, but can I just say, Joanna Jarju, none of them did it while somebody was dying and doing these interviews whilst Prince Philip lay dying, because they would have known that he was very, very ill. It's not so much that they're doing it, and they wanted to go and do their own thing. It's the timing, and it's the accusation of racism, which Harry later, in a Tom Bradbury interview, went, racism? Nobody knows racism in our family. And then they called it unconscious bias. Joanne, they cannot escape that. But it is time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Right, so, John, your Greatest Britain, please.
Well, you may not know the name, Henry de los Rios Polanio, but actually he's a very brave guy who shielded his child and his wife from that Hainaut attacker. And it was the way, I think what got me was the interview that he gave and how sort of calm and reasonable he was. And of course his neighbour was the little boy that had been killed, you know, and he was sort of asked what he thought about it, and he was just saying how awful it was. And he just came across as being an extremely decent guy, there in his bedroom with his wife. And mayhem suddenly emerges. And
he protected.
And he's got this terrible sort of wound on his arm.
That's his heart.
Brave man.
And that's it. And you just think, actually, great guy.
Joanna Jarju.
My Greatest Britain is the Duke and Duchess of Sussex for their global philanthropy with their trip to Nigeria. Great that he's out there creating a better connection with the continent through Invictus. And also, I would like to make the point that they were actually invited by the Chief of Defence Staff. So they haven't set out their whole agenda. If they got a warm welcome and were treated like royals, then...
Yeah, you're not going to win.
Right, my honorary Greatest Brit is the President of Argentina. He's one of the first people that has stood up to China. He's the first person to say, no, I'm not joining BRICS. I want to stay in touch with the West. I'm a capitalist. I don't believe in this union you're building. And I think it's nice to see someone take a stance against China.
I've got to say that the greatest John Sargent's got to be you. He's my winner for the greatest.
Absolutely
Britain.
agreed on that one.
Yeah, brilliant. Henry de los Rios Polani.
That's it, with a name like that.
Right, your Union Jackass, John.
Right, my Union Jackass, Natalie Elphicke, all right, everyone wants her, but what a shambles. I mean, to manage to mess up her own party, the Conservative Party, then mess up the other party, that's not bad, and at the same time be completely unprincipled.
Joanna Georgiou?
Mine is an honorary one, and I'm surprised it's the first time we're giving this guy. It's Benjamin Netanyahu for pressing ahead with Israel's assault into Rafah, even though he doesn't have US backing on it, he doesn't have UK backing on it, and also he asked these people to evacuate the north, and then now he's trying to bomb them in the place that should be their safe haven.
Alex Armstrong.
I think you're going to have a double loss there, unfortunately, Joanna. Mine is Greta Bratty Thunberg, the bully who's been out protesting and screaming at a 21-year-old trying to sing.
Well, I've got to say, it's got to be Greta Thunberg.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Honestly, she's got nothing else to do now. The climate agenda's sort of slipped under the radar. Nobody's
she's got
interested.
older.
So she's coming up now where there's 160 million audience or so to listen to the Eurovision. Right, thank you so much to my brilliant panel, John Sargent, Joanna Georgiou and also Alex Armstrong. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. This was me. This is the first time I've done Fact Check Christys tonight. I've had fun. Listen, join me tomorrow at 3 o'clock for my show, Saturday and Sunday. I'll be bringing you all of the hot topics, big discussions, big debates. Make sure you tune in with me. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care. Up next is one of the greatest shows on earth. I listen to it all the time. Headliners. That's after your weather. Good night. God bless.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The warm weather will continue into the weekend. For many, another cracking day tomorrow. If you like, it's sunny, but we are in for a change by Sunday in the west, where we could well see some thunderstorms. In the east, it's mist and low cloud that's just dribbling back in from the North Sea, turning things fairly murky for the start of the weekend across eastern England. But elsewhere, long clear spells, decent night for spotting the aurora. There is a chance, particularly across the northern half of the UK. Not too chilly either. Temperatures mostly holding up in double digits, certainly in towns and cities. And a fine sunny start to come on Saturday. The main exception will be Lincolnshire down through to Cambridgeshire. The London area may well start a bit murky, but by mid to late morning, that mist and low cloud will have cleared. Just the potential for it to affect some eastern coasts of England at times. And we'll see cloud bubbling up through the day with one or two scattered, but potentially heavy showers over central and northern Scotland. But most will stay dry and fine and warm with temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Sunday's still pretty warm. Bit more of that mist and low cloud, particularly in eastern Scotland. So some ha on that Aberdeenshire coast especially. Greater chance of seeing a few more showers breaking out across the Highlands, but more particularly further south, across the west of Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and western England. Some thunderstorms potentially on Sunday afternoon. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Another warm one, and where it stays fine and sunny in the east, we could get to 26 or 27.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. But you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So, interestingly, Harry listed the date on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me.
Okay.
Are we just putting two and two together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, you know, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere, I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go. How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening. You're watching and listening to GB News. I'm Sam Francis. A look at the headlines at 11 o'clock. The ringleader of an armed robbery in which a police officer was fatally shot has been jailed for life. 38-year-old Sharon Beshanivsky was killed when she interrupted a raid in Bradford nearly 20 years ago. Piran Ditta Khan, who's 75, fled to Pakistan 3 months after her death and then spent 15 years on the run. 3 other men are already in prison for Beshanivsky's murder. Retired Detective Chief Superintendent Andy Brennan has described Ditta Khan as a violent man.
The reason why he's here at 75 years of age is on the basis that he decided to flee the country in order to try and make good his escape and avoid being held responsible and accountable for his part in what had taken place. And let's be absolutely clear, he is clearly the one person that was responsible for organising and planning this and making sure that those that went in there had firearms and loaded firearms in that case.
The Prime Minister insists that people will soon start feeling better off after figures show the UK is officially out of recession. The Office for National Statistics estimates GDP rose by 0.6% in the first 3 months of this year. Predictions were suggesting 0.4%. Rishi Sunak says those figures suggest the economy has real momentum, but Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves accuses the Conservatives of being out of touch.
If you look at this Prime Minister's record, since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, the economy is still £300 worse off per person in the country. So these numbers today are not deserving of the victory lap that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt seem to want to go on.
In other news, a psychotic ex-prisoner who attacked and killed a grandfather has been handed an indefinite hospital order at the Old Bailey today. Thomas O'Halloran was riding his mobility scooter in West London when Lee Byer stabbed him. The 87-year-old suffered multiple stab wounds to his neck, his chest and his abdomen. Police say the motiveless attack has left his family shocked and horrified. Sir Keir Starmer says that flights taking migrants to Rwanda would stop on day one of a Labour government. The party leader has confirmed he'll scrap the scheme, calling it a gimmick. Instead, he's pledged to tackle illegal migration with a new border security command, which he says will include MI5 agents. Dover MP Natalie Elphicke, who's just switched from the Conservatives to the Labour Party, welcomes the approach, accusing Rishi Sunak of failing to keep the borders secure. But the Prime Minister claims many of Sir Keir's proposals are already in place.
The question for Keir Starmer then is, if he cares so much about that, why did he vote against the new laws that we passed to give our law enforcement officers new powers? They've now used those to arrest almost 1,000 people connected with illegal migration, sentence them to hundreds of years in prison, and if it was up to him, all those people will be out on our streets. So I just think it's the rank hypocrisy of this position.
And stargazers are in for a chance to see the northern lights across the UK overnight, thanks to clear skies and a huge and rare solar storm. Forecasts suggest they're likely to be seen across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, Northern England, and, if you're in luck, South Wales too. Experts say it could be the most powerful geomagnetic storm in almost 2 decades. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your